Welcome to another episode of the AI Show Southwest. I'm your host, Shane Solomon, or should I say co-host, along with this man, Matt Greaves. And we're super excited to have on the show today, Helen Wylde-Archibald. I pronounced that right?
You did.
Fantastic. What a pleasure. Now, of course, this show is all about exploring how organizations are using AI here in the Southwest. And there's so much to cover. We've got super guests on the show. But of course, I know you both from a previous company that you worked very closely at. So the transition from there to where you are both now, Matt, can you kind of, give us a bit of an insight how this has all come to be to have this powerhouse on the team?
Yeah, well, I'm incredibly privileged to have Helen working with me on this project. But yeah, going back, I suppose it was about a year ago that I had this idea for creating an AI training and consultancy business to really help support firms with this transition through using AI. And it's one of those, when you get these business ideas and you think, oh, that's a great idea, but you never really do anything about it. Mm-hmm. I thought, actually, if I'm serious about this, I should really start to write a business plan and actually put some pen to paper and actually think about, if I'm serious about this, if I get bored after a couple of weeks, I know it's not for me, but, I kept writing. And before I knew it, I had a fully fledged business plan and got more and more excited. The more research I did about it, the more I thought there's a real opportunity here to help support others with AI. And, one of the things that really motivates me and gets me out of bed in the morning is helping other people. And I could see it as an opportunity to help businesses and help other people with working with AI. So I had this business plan and it was going around in my head. And one day I turned to Helen because quite often we'd have conversations, wouldn't we, about these radical business ideas we have and what it would be like to set up these other businesses. And I said to Helen one day, actually, I've got a real one now, Helen. And would you be kind enough to have a look at my business plan? And she was gracious enough to have a look through my business plan and kind of started from there, really, didn't it?
It absolutely did. Yeah. When he says radical ideas, I was thinking about bunny farms and flower farms and things like that. So this was the first sensible idea either of us had actually in terms of what we might be able to do. And it was great because actually, for me, my background's marketing and I could see the customer audience. I could understand the insights that Matt was talking about. And there is a huge gap at the moment because the truth of the matter is this is the moment to adopt AI. But for businesses, that's a huge thing. That's a huge thing. And you need some help doing that in terms of the thinking and setting up. And then you'll be fine. You'll fly it. It's just that first thing, particularly for small businesses with everything else you got on. So it was one of those where it was an absolute match. We went, yeah, I think that will run. I think it will run.
And it is a minefield out there for people that don't understand. And I think people will always pay for convenience to have consultants and people like that can just accelerate them to where they need to be, because let's be honest, with your likes of Google and even AI, you can be signposted everywhere. So if you can fast track things, pay someone, that knows what they're talking about, people are going to be doing that. Now, you specialize a lot in governance, of course, and this is one of the big things that I really get passionate about as well, about what's real, what can we be using, and it's a big topic, but that's the topic of this today's podcast. So where do you start with that, Helen? And what is your role, purposely within governance?
Well, so in terms of governance, this is a really wide subject, and it's just got, unfortunately, a very boring name. So just forget the name for a moment while I try and unpick the various elements of what's in here. So the first thing is, when you're running a business, you have about 8 things that you need to concentrate on, ranging from strategy to profitability to risk to ESG to IT security, all the way through to adopting new opportunities such as AI. And your board papers and the way that you organise your company will basically reflect that every time you sit down on a board meeting with your senior executive team and your CEO, and those things will come together. Now, there's normally about 6 items on the agenda. Now we've got 2 more. We've got ESG and we've also now got AI. And the thing about those 2 is that they are slightly different in terms of how businesses work than how the rest of the stuff works, which you could get basically from your MBA training, et cetera, et cetera. And consequently, as a board, when you come to look at it for the first time, what you find is that you're dealing with something which is really, really fragmented for business, really fragmented. And it's going to be very difficult to turn that into something where you can be sure that you've got the right strategy, you're making the right investment, you're not wasting money, you're not putting risk into your business, and you're not messing up your security in terms of cyber. So consequently, you're facing into that nightmare. And how do you make those things work? So governance models help you through that transitional period to pull those things together into something which makes sense for your board, including all your stakeholders, your investors, whoever else is involved in your company, all the way through to your people on the front line and your customers in terms of how it looks, and allows you to make sure that you are keeping yourself safe, not wrecking your reputation in the marketplace, and you're adopting the technology in a way that makes sense for your business, not because the technology is there and you feel like using it. And the reason that that's important is that what we're finding already is in a lot of businesses, people have actually got an issue where people are already using the technology and the bosses don't know it. And actually, that's a real risk to business. It's one of the biggest risks they face, because that information could be flowing out of the organisation that's being used to create those opportunities straight into the general melee and possibly into your competitors, or you're in breach of GDPR. So actually, it's not just about how we use it, it's how you make sure you protect yourself before your employees take a decision and say, I'm using AI. And the next thing you know, you've got a major GDPR break.
Matt, there's a lot there to unpack. What's your thoughts on all this governance side of things?
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes back to this idea of we've got free access to these new shiny AI tools, and it's so tempting just to dive right in and start using them. And as Helen says, we're seeing a lot of businesses where their staff are doing exactly that, because AI is an enabler, it's helping them to do their jobs better. But from a business's governance perspective, from an overriding organization structural perspective, it's so important that the business has got a framework in place, has decided which AI tools they're going to use, which AI tools they're not going to use, having those guardrails in place and ensuring that their staff are aware of those guardrails through an AI policy and communicating that, so that the company can be assured that whatever AI is being used, it's being used in the right way that's been pre-approved by the organization. And that's something that, you know, we're working and helping a lot of firms go through that process. And it is almost taking a step back, because a lot of people are already on that AI journey before they've even got the AI policy in place. And it's kind of working backwards a little bit to reverse engineer that. And so sort of say, look, let's make sure we've got those guardrails in place. Let's make sure your staff have got the training to use the right AI tools in the right way. And then we can absolutely start to really amplify the work we're doing through AI.
Now, governance, of course, that word just in its simple terms, you know, and it just sounds expensive. It sounds like an absolute bore chore, and it's one of those things. But then you guys, it's your kind of role to kind of hopefully simplify this for people, hold their hands and guide them along the way. And is this for like small business, or small business expected to do this, or is it your kind of medium-sized people up, or?
No, it's everybody.
Right.
So absolutely, you even in a small business, in fact, you could do yourself more damage by accident in a small business than in, say, a larger one. So the way to look at it is, if we just take a big business, let's just imagine we're a big business for a moment, and one of your team rocks up and says, I'm going to use AI. The CEO will say, just one moment, right? Where are you going to use it? What are you using? Have you talked to the IT department yet? Is it secure? What are you using it for, and how are you checking the content of what you're using? You do realise that this stuff hallucinates. You do realise that sometimes it gets the information wrong. Are you sure you know what you're doing? And by the way, I don't want you doing that until we've got some rules. Okay, so that's effectively how the board are reacting to it, which is we want you to adopt it, but we want to give you guardrails. Okay. Now, in a small business, I think it goes something like this, where you probably are the CEO thinking, I wonder if this can help me make my business more efficient and effective. I've got all this rubbish administration stuff, and I want to offer a really great customer service that enhances my brand and makes my customers happy. And what do I do? Okay. And it's exactly the same question, because actually then in their head, they're worrying about exactly the same thing, which is, we all want to do this, but we need to be able to do this in a context that makes it safe. Okay. Now, I think that's like a black wall for most businesses, because you're so busy worrying about everything else, you're almost going to go park it because it's just something you've got time for. So let's think about it differently. Okay. Let's imagine that you're the CEO of a small business and you've got all these other tasks, and you can't really employ somebody else to do them because that's a lot of money and you haven't really got time to manage them, or you're not even sure it's going to be very efficient to have one person doing lots of tasks.
Okay.
What you effectively do with using AI solutions is you break down some of those tasks. And if you suddenly imagine you've got a range of humanoids behind you who are like office juniors, so they're like apprentices, and you've brought them in and they've each got tasks to do to help you. Now, suddenly, you're being really much more efficient and effective but also you've learnt how to access AI for business. And this is a subtlety. If you then address that AI solution in the same way as if you were talking to your apprentice, which is, right, this morning, we're going to be working on X, Y, and Z. We need to take into consideration the following things. Please don't show me anything you can't show me where you got it from. It needs to have this, this, and this, and I need it framed in such a way. Okay, exactly like you talk to a young apprentice, giving them a task with a sense of context, the story. Okay, when that work comes back, which it will do almost instantaneously, the first thing you're going to do is, just like you do with the apprentices, you're going to check it. And you're going to go through, where did you get that from? Why have you put it in that order? That's really interesting. Let's just debate that for a moment. Okay. Now, suddenly, you are using AI, and you might be using it for a piece of research. You might be using it to create a customer service bot. You might be using it in that way. But you've changed your relationship from this black wall of technology into actually managing the policy in which you want to work and actually managing that application. Okay. Now, once you've got your head into that state, and I would almost say to everybody using it, go and use Copilot first at home, give it a name, build a relationship with it, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. Then imagine how that works in the office, where you might have 5 or 6 young apprentices behind you doing various tasks who are helping you do those pieces. So suddenly you've gone from someone who might work on their own to someone who's working on with a number of different bots behind them, helping them do it, or agents, AI agents helping them. And everybody is enjoying their job more, it's more efficient, it's more effective, you're doing more interesting things, and you're getting the productivity and the improvements in terms of customer service that you want. Okay, so that's the most basic thing.
Sure.
That's the mindset.
Yes.
Right.
Makes sense.
Okay. The next problem you're going to worry about is, how the hell do I make sure that I don't break any of the rules in terms of regulation? And this is where it gets messy. So right now, the regulation surrounding AI is nascent at the very best. It's fragmented. And unlike a lot of regulation that we've had over the year for business, it's not standardized globally. So the USA are almost like the Wild West in terms of what they're doing. They want to have as much freedom as possible. The European are putting together an AI Act, some legislative pieces which are coming together, and that's much more restrictive. The UK is doing guidance only, and we'll come back to that later on when we're chatting about it, but they're doing a guidance structured middle way. And China is trying to get us all to cooperate internationally and come up with one standard, okay? It is a mess. So if you're a company who is working across international borders, you need to think about all of those pieces. If you're just working in the UK, what you're going to find is that you haven't got anything which is black and white yet. All you've got is grey, okay? And that is the governance challenge, because you do have some hard bites of regulation around things like GDPR, which are absolutely out there and you've got to stick to. But in terms of using AI generally, it's still very much in the making. So one of the things that we've been doing is we've been working with ISO 42001, which is a new standard associated with governance. And actually, if you're an ISO company and you're using those already, this is perfect, because it's one of the general systems that they use. That will give you a framework which I think is closest to what the UK is going to settle on. And it will set you up with best practice. If you're not ISO, quite frankly, what we do is we take those standards and say, look, this is the best one to keep you legal, keep you regulated at this moment in time. Use this, even if you're not going to go for accreditation. Scale it to the size of your business, because then at least with everything which is going on in that regulatory mess around us at the moment, whilst this all fragments and reforms, you're not going to be in a position where you've done something which puts your business at risk. And that's what we all worry about, is putting our business at risk.
Yeah, exactly. And policing this side of things as well.
Yes.
How is that going to be done? I'm interested how, I guess it's very similar to the whole GDPR side of things as well.
Yes.
When that all came up, people were thinking, this won't be taken seriously. But by golly, it came along and it came in and it serves a purpose. But how are people going to be policing this AI world?
I guess that's where the ISO standards really come in. And as Helen says, at the minute, from a UK perspective, they're probably one of our best benchmarks and best frameworks for firms who are wanting to create some sort of structure and governance framework. The ISO 42001 is a great place to start to give you that framework. And that's only what we're using when we're talking to clients. But as part of that is then conducting sort of regular audits. So, whether or not the company decides they want to be accredited for ISO 42001 or not, having that framework in place is useful. If they are accredited, then they will need to make sure they're complying with the standards. Even if they're not, it's still best practice to have a regular audit, in the same way that accountants would have an audit compliance review, frequently. exactly the same way to review your compliance with the AI standards in that respect.
And also, I mean, you mentioned GDPR, and there is a forerunner here. So you normally have an officer who is responsible for GDPR within your team, and it's always an interesting debate about who owns it because nobody actually wants to do it. Okay, and normally the poor IT chap ends up having to do it. We're going to need to have exactly the same with AI, and I would argue that you would do well to distribute that around the team so everybody has to do a term. And the reason being is actually IT can only work within the guardrails that you give them. And what you're actually talking about here is cultural change. So I would say it goes to the chief people officer. And actually what they need to do is start to really look at where they're using this, what it impacts in terms of roles. If there is all this productivity and you've got 20% of your time back, what's that person doing with that 20% of their time? Are you going to get your money's worth?
Going on holiday.
Oh, right, exactly. Or are they going surfing? What are they going to do? What rule are you going to apply in your business?
Yeah.
So actually, there is a wake-up call here for various roles in the senior teams that actually this is not for IT to fix. This absolutely is a cultural change, and therefore you need to think about it in terms of your brand with your marketing and sales team. You need to think about your operation in terms of how it helps productivity, and you certainly need to think about it in terms of your people structures and what you're doing.
Yeah, and the standards actually recommend setting up an AI committee, so it's got representatives from stakeholders across the business, all forming part of an AI committee to help provide that direction and guidance for the firm. And I think, as Helen says, having whether it's the C-suite or the key directors in the organisation or an individual who has overall responsibility for AI, but supported by an AI committee is so important, because then you've then got views from across the organisation. You've got input from across the organisation. I think that's so key, not least to onboard your people and get them on the journey as well, rather than it being a directive from above. The staff feel empowered that it's they're part of a journey as well. And I think that's such an important part of companies onboarding AI is to involve their people in that way.
I can see the door and plaque now with the name on it, AI officer.
Yes. Yeah.
You can come in now,
Yeah.
a bit like HR, all these things, and your people officers and stuff like that. It's doing the stuff with the community. So how does this company compare then to the company that you guys have come from, a telecommunications company, into AI? I mean, how do you compare the two? I mean, the principles of business, I guess, are the same. And you've got an amazing CV. Your background is phenomenal, Helen. And it would take us pretty much the whole episode to go through your wonderful credits. But, how does the two companies compare?
So, I mean, before I did what I was doing previously, I actually worked in AI for connecting autonomous vehicles, digital twins, self-flying drones, all sorts of technology for the government in terms of actually how were we going to get that into commercial piece. So I've been dealing with AI probably for the last 15 years and took a break from it to do the last project, to be perfectly honest, in terms of those pieces. For me, this is all about technology. And it's exactly the same principles as we had previously. I came back to the Southwest because I wanted to see jobs created down here for the people like myself who come from the Southwest. We didn't have to leave, because who wants to leave?
Exactly right. I never wanted to leave.
No, we don't want to leave, but there isn't necessarily the work,
Correct.
the quality of roles. And there's some great work going on at the universities at the minute, and we're really transforming. But the way to do that is to grab new opportunities. So we needed broadband. Otherwise, we couldn't possibly do any of these technologies. And, we need to have the broadband coverage, which was why we were involved in that. But now you need to build the application layer on top of that, the solutions. And because this is mainly about small businesses, there is a risk that we get left behind here in the Southwest again. Because for small businesses to get hold of this stuff requires a different way of thinking, and the big six aren't probably going to touch it. So it's people like us who'll come along and say, look, we'll help you do it because we want you to be successful. And the way that I see it playing out in my head is, okay, you get a bit of productivity back, which gives you a bit of thinking time. What I anticipate, having worked with people in the Southwest, is we're really good at being inventive. I mean, crikey, you only survive down here because you can create, right? You've got to be creative and reinvent yourself all the time. We're agile. I think when they get into it, they'll be coming back and saying, I think I can use this to do X. And somewhere amongst all of that, there'll be 6 or 7 absolute gems, transformational things that we can do with this tech. And they'll come out of the small businesses, working with the universities, working with people like us, pulling that together which gives us the next generation of jobs. So now we have got some broadband. Well done.
Mm-hmm.
We can now start to play with this stuff, and we can start to build out, and we can build those skills. And that should give us the opportunity for people who live and grow up down here to stay here, create their own little businesses, or work for others. And as I said, it won't be just about productivity for us. It's what can you do else? What else is there? And that requires not only the technology, it requires a business brain to go, isn't that exciting? How might I do this? And then that's where all the joy comes.
Yeah, you see, I sit at this table as a co-host with Matt, which I'm very grateful for. Apparently, I'm the best in my price range. So
I'm very grateful for you to get involved, Shane.
But, you know, I sit around this table as an enthusiast into AI and adapting it for good and for change. Always aware of what bad can bring, but you always get that with anything in life. You can't have good without the bad because you never find out the difference. But I think for me, AI, I've summed up as like discovering, if you've ever watched Back to the Future, when they discovers that manual that's got all the results, right, for every kind of game that's ever happened, you think, wow, I've got all this information. I'm, you know, rich by my wildest dreams, all this information. That's what I feel with AI. That's what I feel like I've discovered that manual, because what it can do, and we're only scratching the surface on, I don't think anyone really knows what it's going to do and enables to do. You can dream and start creating in our minds, but it's a phenomenal bit of technology or, you know, development in the world.
Yes.
And I'm so excited about it.
Yes.
And I just believe that when Matt told me about what you guys were doing, I said, well, I've got to have a piece of this for the show, because you know, this is like stuff people will be watching back on YouTube or another platform in like another 5 years from now going, God, look at how old fashioned that is, how they're doing that. You know, so it's an exciting time.
It is.
And regulation always has to come in and ruin things, and, you know, not ruin things, but from a CEO, you know, but it's important.
Yes.
You know, and you guys are kind of paving the way for people to kind of get this done relatively stress-free, I would have thought.
I always look at it about setting goalposts. You need to know where the stanchions are. And once you know where the stanchions are, you can organise yourself, other people, to make sure that you're online with the rest of the team to get a goal in the net, which is what you want to do. So regulation for me is giving people those guardrails, giving them the confidence. This is as far as I can go, but no further. Now, what's also interesting is that we can see that there is a evolution here, and there's two things going on at the same time. And I think basically a lot of the media have captured one element and they've failed to capture the other. So there's been lots of talk about the speed of technical translation and how it goes. But I worked in mobile when nothing worked, right? And it was analog. And quite frankly, we were lucky if we get anything working on the phones. And we watched it transform in the space of 2.5 years to digital, and it was transformational and onto data in 3, right? So I've been here before with these fast pieces. None of that matters. The technological people who are absolutely brilliant will sort it all out and it will work because they're really good at that. The problem here is human factors. It's how quickly can your psychology up here manage to make the transference of using those, and what does it do to your innate code as a human being? So how do you philosophically feel about this? So let's use something a bit more wild. Okay, so one output of AI is connecting autonomous vehicles. I was quite heavily involved in that particular piece of technology. And at the beginning, we designed something which the technology worked absolutely perfect, except when you drove it around the streets of Milton Keynes, it did 30 miles an hour, including coming to a hard stop, including going around a corner. And we watched people get out of the car and they were green. We couldn't understand why, because there was no human factors. We hadn't factored that in. We also found people wouldn't get in the car because they were frightened of not being in control. So actually, the bigger part of connecting autonomous vehicles, one of those early applications of how you use AI, is dealing with those issues. So if you've got the regulation and you've got the guardrails, you need to slowly go on a journey how those things are going to work. And what we'll find, the reason we're saying put them in first, is as the technology progresses, people will stumble across ethical issues. They'll stumble across them, and it will cause them an issue, and they'll stop because they'll be quite concerned about what that practically means to them. There may be a bit of learning required. There may be a bit of adjustment required. And actually, it won't be the technology which speeds us along this journey. It will be human factors. It's how quickly can we actually adopt. I don't think there are any losers with AI in business except those companies who don't adopt it.
Oh, absolutely.
So the rule is you haven't really got a choice. give yourself the mental stability of being inside some form of governance framework, which means you've got things under control, and then you're in a safe space, a sandpit to experiment. Everybody else is on the same journey. This is going to be cultural change, so you're going to need to talk about it with people, about what it practically means, and get in touch with it and have those conversations. And then you'll start to build your rules. And what there is there is a convergence point between human beings and what we believe and our culture and our ethics and our philosophy, and how far we will allow the technology to go. And that's why actually things like ISO are really good, because they give you the foundation to explore all of those, work out what those standards should be, and then make that choice about how far you're prepared to go in your business and how that's going to work for you. And it's going to be a useful ethical conversation for most marketeers and most people officers in businesses, because it's coming, and it's not one which has happened around a board table probably since we introduced mobile phones. So it's at least 30 years. So most people sitting in the boardroom now were not present when the last conversation of this nature took place, which is why everyone's getting so het up, because actually it requires you to do something different and think differently to how you've been trained to necessarily do in the past.
Do you think this is a bigger kind of scenario than the mobile phone, or do you feel it equal to? Do you think this is going to be,
I think
more significant boost?
I think it is more significant because in many ways it's virtual. So the thing about a mobile phone is everyone got so excited about phones. And the beginning, honestly, Shane, if you've seen the original mobile phones, half of them were so hideous and they didn't work and they burst into flames. And we had a physical thing to hang it on. And if you think about it, we went from candy bar to flip top to laptops to iPads, all this stuff. And it was great. And it had a form factor. So you could get a box and open it. The thing about AI is a lot of the early days of this is going to much be about virtual stuff, like how you work, what are you doing? So things like customer services, which is quite earthful when you think about it. What gives you a good customer experience? How quickly was it answered? Well, that depends how difficult it was to do and how important it was to you. Did you feel you got a good service? Were you looked after, et cetera, et cetera? So this is quite a lot more complex in terms of those factors. And there is no hard artifact that anyone's going to hand you which says this is AI. It's all about the symptomatic elements of this and how it all works together. Now, in a capitalist society like this, where everything's about things, that's quite difficult. It's quite difficult because we've been trained to think more about how things actually appear to us. And now we're going to have to think about how things are done. So we're going to be human beings and human doings rather than saying, I've got this and this is my status symbol. It becomes basically an intellectual economy and how you use that in the right way to take things forward. That's a hell of a change. So I think from a social perspective, this is probably one of the biggest changes since the arrival of cars in all probability, and that change in transport. And it wasn't the car itself, it's the fact you were moving away from very slow transport to having transportation at speed. It's a similar sort of thing.
So what, episode 2 in, the content that's coming out of people's mouths, including our last couple of guests as well, has been phenomenal. Matt, is there anything you'd like to add to this podcast? Because I'm always mindful how time ticks away.
I know, it's amazing how quick the time goes, actually, isn't it? Because we could sit here and talk for a lot longer on this subject. I think for me, I guess the important thing as well is it's very easy to talk about AI governance for those organizations that are very forward thinking and thinking, yes, we want to adopt AI, so therefore we need to have AI governance in place. But what about those organizations that are saying, actually, we're not going to get too much involved with AI, so therefore we don't need to worry about AI governance? I think the important point there is actually we probably do. Would you agree with that, Helen?
I don't think I don't see how any organisation can, within the next 2 to 3 years, not start using AI. Any organisation at all. And I would challenge it even from a small farm all the way through to a large conurbation. And the reason being is your supply chain will be using it.
Yeah, it will make it hard to compete, right? Because your competitors are going to be
using it. Or your
using
staff are already using it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Goodness knows what they might be doing, There's also an ethical reason why that's important as well, which I think particularly down here in Cornwall and the Southwest is really important. The bigger side of AI, the stuff which uses large language models and stuff like that, is not necessarily good for the environment. So we've just spent all this time putting in gigabit capable broadband and we haven't really got enough power anyway. The way that AI works at the moment is not always as efficient as it could do in terms of energy. Now, that's at the top end, not doing the stuff on Copilot, not Agenix, okay? But as you get to the large language models and generative AI, you're talking about a need for power, okay? Now, what might end up being the currency in later years around this in a 10-year window might be about powering it. Now, that's interesting for small businesses. That's interesting because they don't need that bill to go up. Yeah, exactly, because it's already gone up enormously. So by being in control now of how you're using AI, as we get to the later stages with agentics and the general stuff that's going to happen, regenerative and so on, and beyond that point, if your business isn't in those, you've got enough control to prevent yourself being impacted by that particular piece. Put it this way, one large business said to me, we're going to put a call centre in the middle of Cornwall. And I said, how are you going to power because it doesn't actually give you any jobs, it's an empty room. No jobs from that, right? So we're going to put this down here, we're going to do that. And I said, well, how are you going to power it? There's no power down there. So we'll put a mini nuclear reactor in the basement. I was like, we are a UNESCO site. You cannot do that. It hadn't occurred to them that there are limitations at some of the outer edges of some of this stuff that we're doing. So we don't want to be in that situation where everybody else is sucking the power out of the grid for the small businesses. So being in the conversation now, understanding the implications of what's going on, all of this becomes so much easier for you in terms of running those smaller businesses and making sure you don't end up paying for the big ticket items, which need to be thought through completely differently and with a completely different set of rules to what the rest of us need in terms of making our businesses more efficient and effective.
Protection. We like a bit of protection.
A protection, yes.
You know, that's what it is, I think, for businesses. And that's all we ever want as business owners or organizations, that our businesses are protected. Well, Helen, we could obviously speak to you for hours and hours and hours, and we will over the time because of your connection with the company. But is there anything else you'd like to add into this podcast that I've not mentioned about today? Or
I think there's just one element to all of this, which is you haven't missed the boat on AI. No business has, okay? But this year's the year to start. Start small, put some rules around it for you so you feel safe. It's not ageist. Anyone can use AI. I've got my mum using it at 86 very efficiently. She's made a new friend all the way through it, etc. So you can all use it. It's an iterative science. Okay, a bit like using a mobile phone. It's iterative. Get used to it. Work out what it does. Learn how to do the prompts and enjoy it. Okay, because if you don't get yourself into this mindset now, you might actually miss the boat if you're not careful, and you may be one of the businesses that falls behind. You don't want that. You don't need to be at the front. You just need to be somewhere in the middle, understanding what this all means and learning as you go. And it's an iterative process. Just learn as you go. Learn a little bit more every day and enjoy it. Because at the end of the day, technology is only here to make life better. It's additive. So how are you going to use this for your business, your life, to make it additive and enjoy it? Because it's fun.
Sold it to me. I'm in. I'm all in.
I think that's a wonderful place to wrap up and leave.
Perfect place to wrap up. Well, Helen, thank you so much indeed. If you're not already following Helen Wylde-Archibald, make sure you do on LinkedIn. You are still on LinkedIn, I'm assuming. Yeah, I haven't been on LinkedIn for a while, you know. Yeah. I haven't been on there for at least a couple of months. I'm getting withdrawals, so I have to get back on there. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give it a like. Give us a subscribe as well. We appreciate any of your comments. And look, on behalf of myself and Matt, co-host of this wonderful new podcast we're super excited about, we will see you in the next episode. Thank you very much indeed, Helen. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.